Okay, so we just talked about the typical vertebrate myelinated motor neuron, but as I mentioned to you before, these aren't the only shapes that neurons can have. So we are going to talk about the 5 major classifications of neurons by structure. Okay, here we go. So let's start over here. 5 major classifications of neurons by structure. Okay, let me just make sure you can actually see that. Okay, I think you can. Okay, so the first one we're going to talk about is called unipolar. They look very cute. Here we go. So, we'll start over here. So here we've got the neuron, and it's got some bits. And this is the nucleus, which means if that is the nucleus, then this is the soma, okay? And this is called a neuronal process, okay? All right, so this is our good old unipolar cell. Okay, that is our first category. And the thing that defines a unipolar cell is that it has only one neuronal process extending away from the soma, okay? So only one neuronal process. And because neuronal process is a new word, let's pick orange this time. Okay? And that means an extension or branch or appendage. Okay, like an arm or a branch, it's all the same thing, okay? So unipolar has one thing extending away from the soma, okay? These are also sometimes called brush cells. Okay, brush cells are the most common unipolar cell in humans, which is why unipolar, brush cell, they kind of get used like the same word, okay? And most primary sensory neurons are unipolar. So what is a primary sensory neuron? All right, one thing at a time. So most primary sensory neurons are unipolar, and primary sensory neuron, what does that mean? It means that they are, okay, I'm going to use more colors. So, means that they are the first neuron to interact with the outside world. So they're like, in your Latte Panda kit, they're like the sensors, okay? So they're the thing that translates the real world heat, vibration, light. It translates that into something that the rest of the system can use, okay? So these are the first cells to interact with light or chemicals or vibrations. Okay? All right. And in humans, they're most often found in the brain or the brainstem. So found in brain and brain stem. Okay. I'm going to do something. I'm going to rewrite this in purple because it is a definition and I want it to stand out. Okay. Neuronal process, which means extension. Whoop. Branch or appendage. All right, lovely. Okay, so that's unipolar. Can you guess what the next one will be? Okay, the next one, I'll draw underneath it. We're just gonna go around in a circle, maybe I'll just go across here. I'm skipping this space because there's a lot of glare there, and I know you can't see that. Okay, so let's draw the next type of cell, and that is our bipolar cell. So we're going to start with a nice, cute cell body, okay? And a bipolar cell, maybe you already guessed, has two things coming off of it. Okay? All right. So this one is called bipolar. Okay? So a bipolar cell has two processes. Extending from the cell body. Okay, so let's label this just like our other one. So here we have our soma, okay? And then we have our first process, which usually is carrying electrical signal towards the soma. So what does that mean it is? That means it is a dendrite. Okay? And the second usually carries electrical signal away from the soma, meaning it is an axon. Okay. All right. So the first one is our dendrite, which carries info to the soma, aka it is a dendrite. And the second one carries info away from soma, aka it is an axon. Okay, so Most sensory neurons that are not the primary sensory neurons, so the very first sensor neurons are unipolar. But then usually the next ones are bipolar. And usually what these cells are doing is they're filtering or amplifying whatever signal is coming from the unipolar cells, okay? So these are most non-primary sensory neuron. So non-primary sensory neurons, what do they usually do? They usually filter or amplify signals from the primary sensory neuron. Okay. All right. And in humans, they're typically found in the eye, the ear, the nose, and the spine. Okay? In the eye, they're in the retina. And the retina is the very back of your eyeball, which is collecting light and allowing you to see. Okay? In the ear, they're in your vestibular nerve. And the vestibular nerve is a really important nerve when it comes to your balance. Okay? So it helps you keep your balance. In the nose, these are cells that are connected to the hair cells. And hair cells, they are important for detecting vibrations. And also they are part of how you detect smells. But they don't have like a nice word for it. Because they're still being studied and we're still not quite sure what's going on. We do know that we have found bipolar cells in the nose. And then in the spine, they're in what's called spinal ganglia. Okay? And ganglia, here I'll underline it. Ganglia are clusters of cell bodies. So the somas of a bunch of cells are clustered together in the spinal cord. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. Because in spinal ganglia, no. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. Yeah. So spinal ganglia are clusters of nerve bodies that are in the spine. And this is useful because if the cell bodies are right next to each other, then the axons, they can also bundle like a cable, which means that they can send signal faster and further. Okay? All right. So our next type of neuron structure, it's got a bit of a longer name. It's called pseudo-unipolar. So pseudo is like fake, and then unipolar, we already knew. So here's what it looks like. Let's draw it first, okay? So pseudo-unipolar, it does have a cell body, just like the rest of them. It has one branch coming off, but then that branch divides into two branches, okay? All right, so here's our cell body. with the nucleus. So this is our soma. Okay, so pseudo-unipolar. Okay, so what are these? This type of neuron structure is usually found in the peripheral nervous system, so out in our limbs, and it's usually a sensory neuron. So it is a peripheral nervous system sensory neuron, whereas the others, so these, were all central nervous system sensory neurons, okay? So if they're in the eye, the ear, anything in our head or in our spine, that's the central nervous system. These are in the rest of the body, okay? So the axon splits into two branches. Okay, so here we go. So yeah, it doesn't have dendrites. So this is an axon because this thing is carrying electrical signal away from the soma, okay? And then when it splits, one goes that way, and this one goes this way. And so the one that goes this way, we're going to call the central branch. Okay? And the one that comes down this way, we are going to call the peripheral branch. Okay? So the names will make sense in just a moment. 1, the central branch. That one, central branch, that goes to the spinal cord and to the brain. So it goes to the central nervous system, to spinal cord plus brain. And the second one, our peripheral branch. This one goes to your skin, your joints, your muscles. I thought it was to glands as well, but maybe not. Okay, definitely it goes to your skin, joints, and muscles. So it goes out to the rest of the body, okay? And so these are usually found in the spine. So in humans, they are found in what's called dorsal root ganglia. Okay, this is a new word. Gonna underline it and define it. Okay, and this is part of the spinal cord. So if I were to draw, okay, so let's say that I have myself this cute little brain, and we've got the cerebellum in the back, and then we've got the spinal cord coming down. And if I were to take a knife and cut like this. Oh, I drew it wrong. Oh. Okay, so the spine cutting here. Okay? So what it would look like is, so this is the back and this is the stomach, right? So in the spine, what you have is, you have what looks like okay. It looks kind of like a butterfly. It's actually really pretty. Let's see. Color I have not used. So I'm going to draw the first horn, and then the little horn, and then this is the hole in the bone. So this is the bone, okay, where your spine, that creates the vertebral column, okay? That's what they look like. And dorsal root ganglia. Okay, so just a reminder of our orientation. This is to the back, and this is to the stomach. Okay? So, dorsal root ganglia are just right here. And remember what I said ganglia was. Ganglia is clusters of cell bodies. And what happens is these cell bodies, they send out their axons together to this main middle channel, and that's where they branch, okay? That's where some of them travel up the spine into our brain, and some of them travel down the spine or out into the body, okay? All right, so they're found in dorsal root ganglia, and guess what? They actually develop from bipolar cells, okay? So I'll just write it here. They develop from bipolar cells, okay? So they actually start out growing two branches out in either direction, and then the two branches fuse and then become a single axon, okay? It's pretty wild. All right, so next we are finally getting back to our typical neuron, which in this framework is called a multipolar neuron, okay? So here's what a multipolar neuron looks like. You're really familiar with it already, but we're going to draw a nice simplified version of it. So let's start with our cell body, okay? It's got lots of dendrites coming off of it. This is the nucleus. That's how you know this is the soma. Okay? And then it has this long tail. Okay, so let's label our dude soma. Okay, and these all carry information towards the soma. Okay, so they are all dendrites. All right, then this, our good old axon. And last but not least, our axon terminal. Okay, so here we go. The generic version of our typical vertebrate myelinated motor neuron is called a multipolar neuron. Okay, so multipolar. All right, so these cells have a soma surrounded by many dendrites. Okay? And these are small and very branching as compared to the axon, which is very, very long. So they have one long axon. Okay? And the majority, turns out, the majority of neurons in the vertebrate nervous system are multipolar. So the majority of neurons in the vertebrate nervous system. NS stands for nervous system. Okay, so they function as motor neurons, which I talked about before. Motor neurons are neurons that connect to muscles. And they also function as interneurons, which is a new word. So they function as motor neurons and as interneurons. So what are interneurons? Well, you are about to find out. So interneurons, how to do this? Okay. So they complete neural circuits by connecting sensory, motor, and central nervous system neurons to each other. And where did I write the rest of this? Oh yes, here it is. Yes. They create neural circuits by connecting sensory, motor, and CNS neurons to each other. And they're crucial for reflexes, neuronal oscillations, which is the fancy word for brain waves, and also for neurogenesis, which is when you create new neurons, okay? So they create neural circuits by connecting motor, sensory, and CNS neurons. Okay? They are crucial for reflexes. I'm assuming everyone knows what a reflex is, yeah? So that is a very fast signal that doesn't actually go all the way to the brain. It just goes to your spinal cord and comes back. That's what tells you to pull your hand back when something is hot, or when a door is about to close on your hand. Any fast movement that you're not really thinking about, that we can say is a reflex. So reflexes, neuronal oscillations, which I said was a fancy term for brain waves. Brain waves. Okay? Oops, wrong color. Okay? Oh no, still the wrong color. Okay. Third one's the charm. All right. And neurogenesis. Whew. Okay. So, neurogenesis, that is creating new neurons. Amazing. Okay. And then the last thing not the last thing. Far from the last thing. Okay, so in humans, they are found in write down over here. So they are found in the cortex of your brain. So that's the outer layer of your brain, found in cortex. They're found in your spinal cord. And they are found in autonomic ganglia. Okay, so we're familiar with the term ganglia, but autonomic is new. So we're going to define this. And autonomic ganglia, these are clusters of neurons that control and sense your internal organs, okay? Clusters of neurons that control plus sense your internal organs. Okay. All right, and then now, the thing that I want to demonstrate to you is the true scale of a multipolar neuron, okay? So, multipolar neurons, and I guess also pseudo-unipolar neurons. The scale, the actual scale, so here, this is sort of like a cartoon, okay? But there are some multipolar neurons that start in your spine and go all the way down to your toe, to your foot. That's a huge distance for a cell. You know, we can't even see cells without a microscope, okay? So imagine, it's like if I started over here, and here's our cell body with the dendrites, that's the soma, and then the axon just goes and goes and goes and goes and goes and goes and probably even goes even further, and then it has the axon terminal, okay? All right, so that's just to point out the scale. And we will just barely have enough space. Last but not least is the final structure that neurons can take. Anybody have any guesses? Not that I'm going to be able to hear you say it, but okay. So the last one is called anaxonic. It's a really weird word. Let me write it down. Okay, wait, first let me draw it. Okay. So here is an anaxonic cell. So this is the cell body. Here's our nucleus. And it's got a lot of little branches. Okay? And unlike the other cell types, you cannot tell which of these is a dendrite, meaning which one is taking signal into the soma, or if it's an axon. There's no long axon. All of the neuronal processes are just small and kind of branching, and they all look about the same size. So you cannot distinguish, you can't tell which of these is a dendrite and which of these is an axon simply from its structure. You have to do some other test, okay? So here we go. This is the soma, and here's a bunch of neuronal processes, and we do not know. Just by looking at it, you cannot tell which of these processes is carrying information in or out, okay? So this last form is called anaxonic, okay? And you'll notice in the name, you see axon, and then an, An means not, without. So anaxonic, without an axon. Okay? So it has many neuronal processes, but cannot distinguish an axon by structure alone. Okay? Then, so what do these do and why are they important? All right, so these cells, anaxonic cells, they can influence the electrical excitability of other cells. So they can affect like how good a signal is, how strong a signal is, and how long the signal lasts from other cells, okay? So they're kind of like the knobs, like the volume knob and like maybe the balance and, so they're like these knobs in our nervous system, okay? So they can influence the electrical excitability of other neurons. And what this means functionally is they can affect the fidelity. Fidelity is like how noisy the signal is. The fidelity, strength, and lifetime of signals from other neurons. Okay? All right. So, what else do we know about anaxonic neurons? So, almost all of the neurons that are born when you are an adult, those are anaxonic, okay? Usually, and for a long time, we thought that all of the neurons that you're ever going to have in your life, they are made when you're born and you never make any more, okay? That's what we thought for a really long time. And then recently, there was this really beautiful study which I will put into the Google Classroom as an additional material for you to read if you want to. It's a very cool study where they discovered that actually mammals can grow new neurons in their central nervous system when they are adults, okay? So almost all central nervous system cells born in adulthood, okay? They seem to be anaxonic. Okay, so this is kind of what got people's attention about these cells. We didn't really know what they were doing before, but now we're like, ooh, okay, they're doing something. They're doing something really cool. Okay, so they are found in our brain and in our retina, and they're also found in the central nervous system of invertebrates. So they're kind of everywhere. And actually, unipolar cells are technically a special kind of anaxonic because unipolar cells also don't have an axon, technically, okay? But functionally, what these guys do is they act as non-spiking. Okay, that's a new word. Don't worry, we will define it. Non-spiking neurons, which means they use graded potentials. Okay, lots of new words. Don't worry, we're going to define all of them Okay, so non-spiking neurons that use graded potentials. Okay, so these two we're going to get to later when we talk about the different kinds of electrical activity that neurons can experience. Okay? So these are the 5 major classifications of neurons based on their structure. So in the next video, I'm going to talk about glial cells, the true heroes of your nervous system. Okay?